here. Commander Uilu Otosh, you must be aware that Princess Minnow the Fin was severely wounded in the terror attack at the funeral of her grandfather, Thumor Anhu the Fin. My lady lost her legs and is not able to move on her own or take care of her most basic day-to-day necessities. So the princess's servants are absolutely indispensable. As it is, we strove to minimize the size of our group as much as possible to reduce friction with the Council of Rulers. We did not even take any mages, despite the fact that, as ruler of the First Directory, she is entitled to a magnificent retinue containing many mages of all kinds. The guard commander furrowed his brow and started to think. This really was more complicated than it looked. Outsiders were categorically forbidden from entering the palace. However, without those servants, it was doubtful the council session would take place at all. After all, great archmage co-ruler Onuri Untalavares wasn't going to be personally carrying the crippled princess and setting her on the podium, and he certainly wouldn't be readjusting her dress or carrying her out to the toilet. And that was what made up the commander's mind. Okay, then. The servants may enter. But first I must search them to make sure there are no dangerous items concealed in their clothing. I'll also need to give the throne a thorough inspection. And as for you, Honorable Macpeo Unroy, I humbly request that you leave your magic wand at the entrance. Regrettable as it may be, rules are rules. The princess gave a silent nod, consenting to the search of her retinue. And they were very thorough, but nothing suspicious was found. The burly pack mule was carrying only a holographic screen generator, a completely standard model like anyone might use to provide visual aid to a speech. The servant girl was wearing no jewelry and didn't even have pockets in her clothing, so she also made it through the inspection unimpeded. A few minutes later, the princess's retinue was back on its way and, after walking into the main hall of the palace, turned a corner into a room where those about to speak in the small council chamber could get some rest or tidy themselves up. Just after the doors closed behind them, the mage diviner gave a happy chuckle. See, Princess Minnow, I told you it wouldn't be too hard to sneak Roman Pavlovich and Tamara into the palace. When he saw fear on the ruler's face, Macpeo hurried to add, Don't be afraid. We can speak openly here. The palace was checked thoroughly this morning, and no microphones, spy cameras, or other foreign objects were found. The only room the guard did not check, as per tradition, was the council chamber itself. Up on the levitating throne, Minnow adjusted the uncomfortable high collar of her dress and sat back wearily in her chair. Although I've never entered this palace before, I am perfectly familiar with the way things work here. Ever since an order from my great-grandfather, co-ruler of humanity, Archmage Yuho Loro Lafin, more than 200 years ago, both the large and small council chambers have been off-limits to anyone except members of the ruling council and invited speakers. And yet we both also know that is not exactly the whole truth, Princess, the mage diviner said with a smirk and wily chuckle. An exception is made for one lone cleaning woman who regularly tidies up all over the palace. In her 40 years of impeccable service, she has earned the complete trust of the guard. But that cleaning woman just so happens to hail from the First Directory and be a faithful subject of yours. So she got everything ready yesterday. Princess Minnow took a heavy sigh. The young ruler was extremely displeased with all this. It was a great shame, but there was no other way to stay in power. They would have to spook the ruling council a bit and put the fear of God into them. The talented mage seer had studied all possible lines of the future a day prior, and warned the princess that her enemies from the other magical dynasties were in quite a decisive mood. According to him, it was inevitable that Minnow Lafin would suffer at least attempted mental attacks during the council session, and it was just as inevitable that the council would end with a vote to demand she be stripped of her title as head of the Lafin faction in the game, and that co-ruler Nat Lafin be deposed as ruler of the First Directory in the real world. Now the princess had no fear of mental attacks.